So, hi. I'm Jade. At my sister's engagement party, I saw her slip something into my wedding cake slice when she thought I wasn't looking. I smiled, switched our plates when everyone turned to watch the slideshow, and watched her fiancé eat it. Instead, 20 minutes later, he excused himself, face pale, hands trembling. They thought I was oblivious, but they had no idea I already knew about the deleted texts, the forged signatures, their plan to take everything I'd built. Ever wonder if the people raising champagne to your happiness are actually plotting your downfall? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The clink of crystal flutes echoed across the marble terrace. String quartet music drifted through the evening air, too refined to intrude, yet too perfect to be authentic. That's how the whole celebration felt. Manufactured. The lighting was romantic, the florals were abundant, and my name was barely spelled correctly on the place card. Jade with an A, right? Bianca had asked, smirking when the calligrapher inked the cards. Always has been, I replied softly, knowing she knew. The celebration was for my wedding, just 2 weeks away. But the engagement party felt like Bianca's campaign launch, fashion show, and coronation all combined. Co-hosting, she called it. I funded most of it. She selected the venue. I created the guest list. She approved the menu. Nathan, my fiancé, just nodded, distracted and charming, playing the devoted husband-to-be to a crowd that couldn't see through the performance. I'd spent the day confirming details both for tonight and the approaching wedding, finalizing seating arrangements and appeasing vendors. My parents arrived early and immediately asked if Bianca had chosen the desserts. I said yes. They smiled, pleased. By the time speeches began and the servers brought out the signature cakes, mini versions of our wedding cake for guests to preview, I was ready to escape. Everyone, Nathan began, standing tall, arm casually draped around Bianca's shoulder like they were the couple being celebrated. Thank you for coming tonight. I looked up. He wasn't looking at me. His hand slid from Bianca's shoulder down to her waist, lingering there. She's been my inspiration, he continued. Through late nights, impossible deadlines, and every triumph and setback, Jade's been the reason this relationship works. That was the first time he'd said my name all evening. Bianca turned to me, raising her flute. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. To unwavering loyalty, she said with a slight tilt of her head that made me feel like she was laughing at a private joke. I smiled back, measured, practiced. My cake slice, still untouched, sat just to my right on a delicate china plate. Nathan reached over, casually switching it with the one in front of him. Yours looked bigger, he said, eyes twinkling. Bianca laughed, brushing her fingers through her chestnut hair. He's always so thoughtful. There it was, that tiny glitch, a flicker of something in her gaze, a sideways glance too quick to be innocent, and suddenly I knew it wasn't paranoia. It was pattern recognition. Earlier, I'd noticed Bianca whisper something to Nathan when she returned from the kitchen. I'd also seen her hover over the dessert table when she thought no one was watching. And now Nathan was offering me a cake, his cake, with a frosting Bianca had insisted on changing at the last minute. They thought I wouldn't notice, but I did. I didn't flinch. I nodded, reached slowly for the plate he'd placed near me. Then, with a smooth motion, swapped it again when their attention shifted to the slideshow beginning on the projector screen. My plate was now untouched and safe. His now had whatever they'd meant for me. 20 minutes later, Nathan excused himself. His movements were too deliberate. His smile strained under pressure. Just stepping out for air, he said. His voice had an unnatural pitch, like it belonged to someone else. I watched him walk toward the garden, unsteady but trying to hide it. One hand gripped his phone like it was fused to his palm. Our father asked Bianca if he was feeling well. She just said, Probably too much champagne. I said nothing. I looked at the cake slice in front of me, the one she'd tried to steer toward my mouth. I turned it slightly, examining the surface. There was no need to inspect further. I already knew. You don't grow up as the overlooked daughter without learning to recognize deception, especially when it's wrapped in designer clothes and coated with artificial sweetness. I stood just long enough to watch Nathan disappear down the garden path. His stride faltered slightly on the stone steps, but he maintained his posture like an actor trained never to break character, just improvise. I waited a moment, pretended, to check my phone, then quietly excused myself from the table. No one noticed. They rarely did. The garden path was dimmer than I expected. Solar lanterns cast a soft glow over the manicured hedges, the scent of jasmine and fresh mulch mingling in the night air. Gauzy curtains at the gazebo entrance swayed slightly in the evening breeze. I didn't follow to check on him. I came to confirm something I'd been suspecting for weeks, a doubt I'd buried beneath wedding preparations and social obligations. But it had a heartbeat now. As I rounded the bend near the koi pond, voices carried through the bamboo screen behind a stone bench. Low, urgent, frustrated. "He didn't eat it," hissed Bianca. "I watched him. He switched it back somehow." There was a pause. Then Nathan's voice, strained, followed. "You said you'd handle this. We can't postpone again, Bianca. It has to be now." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Every nerve in my body went still, not tense, just alert, like my skin had developed microscopic sensors, absorbing information more precisely than my ears ever could. I took 2 steps back into the shadows, positioning myself just behind the curve of an ornamental maple. "You think I don't know that?" Bianca snapped, her words coming faster. "She's not stupid. I told you this wouldn't be simple." My phone vibrated softly in my clutch. I opened it without looking down. A message preview appeared. Results confirmed. "Call when you can. Marcus." Marcus, my college roommate's brother, now a forensic accountant in Seattle. I'd reached out 8 weeks ago when I found something peculiar in our joint wedding account. 3 months earlier, I was updating our wedding website, looking for photos to upload when I found something strange in Nathan's cloud storage. A folder, labeled Phoenix, contained documents that weren't addressed to me. They weren't even about me. They were coded, vague, but the recipient, Bianca's personal email, and the subject line, Phase 3, made my stomach drop. I remembered the cold that settled in my chest that night, the way I stared at the screen, rereading lines like they might reshape themselves into something innocent. Bianca had introduced me to Nathan. She'd encouraged me toward him. "He's perfect. For you," she had insisted one Thanksgiving long before I knew better. "Successful, ambitious, exactly what you need." And I, always the accommodating sister, had smiled and trusted. That's what I'd been taught to do. Now I stood feet away from them, hearing what that trust had cost me. Nathan sighed. "This is getting messy. You said she wouldn't suspect anything." Bianca's heels clicked softly on the stone as she shifted her weight. "We'll adapt. We still have the assets secured under my name. That's the important part." "That's not what we discussed. The timing matters." Their words blurred together. After that. Not because I couldn't hear, but because I no longer needed to. I had enough. The cake, the whispers, the hidden folder. It all connected now. Not paranoia, not insecurity. Truth. I stepped forward, deliberate but casual. My heels made just enough noise to alert them. They straightened like children caught stealing cookies. "Bianca," I said smoothly, "Nathan doesn't look well. Should we call it a night?" She blinked. Nathan flinched. They didn't know what I'd heard, and that was my advantage. She opened her mouth to say something, perhaps a lie, perhaps an excuse, but closed it again. Her fingers fidgeted with her clutch, that designer purse she never let out of her sight, like it contained all her secrets. "It's nothing," she finally said. "Just the heat. These spring evenings can be deceptive." I nodded, voice honey smooth. "They are. Funny how things can seem one way but be another entirely." Nathan forced a laugh, but it cracked halfway through. "Maybe we should wrap up soon." "I think that's a good idea." I smiled at both of them, holding their gaze. No need to overplay it. Behind me, the garden path stretched back to the terrace. Music floated through the air again. Something classical. Too cheerful. I didn't move yet. I gave them just enough silence to wonder how much I'd heard, how much I knew. I felt their discomfort expanding in the space between us. Nathan didn't speak. His mouth had opened slightly, just enough for me to see uncertainty ripple beneath his composed exterior. That silence told me more than any explanation ever could. I let it hang there, 3 long seconds of eye contact before I turned away and walked back to the party. The music was too upbeat for what I was carrying inside. Guests were laughing, clinking glasses, taking selfies near the fountain I had suggested. I forced one last tight smile, thanked the caterer, and slipped away. By the time I pulled into my driveway in Austin, just after midnight, a light rain had begun. The streetlights cast an amber glow across the crepe myrtle trees lining my walkway, and the scent of rain-soaked earth filled the air. I parked in the far corner of the driveway, not wanting headlights to disturb my neighbors. Inside, the house was silent. Nathan hadn't come home yet. I didn't expect him to. I slipped off my heels and walked directly to my home office at the back of the house. No lights, just the blue glow of my standby computer monitor and the gentle rhythm of rain against the windows. The shadows in the room felt heavier than usual. Maybe because they knew, too. I sat down, opened the locked drawer beneath my desk, and retrieved the earrings I had worn that evening. Simple pearls, a birthday gift from my grandmother. Though Nathan believed he'd selected them, the truth was simpler and sadder. Marcus had modified them. He'd installed tiny recording devices inside after I told him something felt wrong. That was 4 months ago. I'd never activated them until tonight. I connected them to my laptop. The files loaded quickly. There it was, the clink of glasses. Nathan leaning forward. A pause. The brief flick of his eyes toward Bianca. Then the garden recording. Bianca's voice. He didn't eat it. I watched him. "Nathan, you said you'd handle this. We can't postpone again." My breath didn't catch. My eyes didn't well up. I sat motionless, watching my life unravel from the outside. Pixel by pixel. I paused the video, rewound, played it again. Then I opened a new document and began transcribing word for word. It took less than 20 minutes. When I finished, I printed the pages and slipped them into a navy blue folder. In thick marker, I wrote one word on the cover: evidence. I leaned back in my chair and turned toward the bookshelf. Behind the middle row, tucked behind financial statements and design portfolios, sat a small fireproof safe. I entered the code. Inside, everything was exactly as I'd left it. On top, a prenuptial agreement I had signed 6 months ago, reluctantly. Nathan had insisted. Bianca reviewed it. Her colleague drafted it. I hadn't questioned it then. Below it, the torn application for a business loan we'd argued over 2 months into our engagement. It was meant to expand my design studio. "We fought," he shouted. I relented. He tore it up during an argument and tossed it in the recycling bin. I retrieved it and kept both pieces. That night, I remembered what Bianca had told me just before we got engaged. Prenups are for women who don't trust their men or themselves. You're not one of those women, are you, Jade? It had sounded like sisterly wisdom at the time. Now it echoed like a warning I'd missed. I looked at the clock. 4:17 a.m. Still raining, still dark. But I wasn't tired, just hollow, like everything inside had rearranged itself and was waiting for instructions on what to do next. The doorbell rang. That never happened at this hour. I wrapped a cardigan around myself and opened the door cautiously. A petite woman stood there holding a manila envelope protected by a plastic sleeve. She wore a raincoat, hood down, hair pulled back tight like sleep was a luxury she'd abandoned long ago. "Ms. Chen?" she asked quietly. "I know it's early, but I'm flying to Chicago in a few hours. I had to bring this to you in person." My stomach tightened. "I used to work for your father's firm 3 years ago," she added, as if explaining her presence. "My name's Eliza. I was in accounting. I remember you." She handed me the envelope. I didn't understand what I was seeing at the time, but after what happened with your mother's foundation grants, I pieced it together. "It's all in there." I nodded slowly, unable to speak. I didn't feel right leaving without doing something. "I'm sorry I waited so long." I thanked her. She turned and walked back into the wet darkness. I closed the door and returned to my office. The envelope was warm from her hands. Inside, printed emails, time-stamped bank statements, a receipt from a wellness retreat I had paid for 4 years ago when Bianca said she needed time away from family pressure. There was also a blurry photo of 2 people sitting at a resort bar, Nathan and Bianca. The photo was dated 2 years before she introduced us. That's when it all fell into place. The retreat, the pressure to date him, the carefully timed coincidences, the joint account irregularities, the disappearing assets. It hadn't been misunderstandings. It had been strategy. I pulled out my phone. The screen lit up with Marcus's last text. "Ready when you need me." I pressed call. A calm voice answered on the second ring. "Jade." I cleared my throat. "Yes, I'm ready to move forward. No more waiting." There was a pause. Then Marcus asked gently, "Are you sure you want to do this? There's no going back." And I said, "I've never been more certain of anything in my life." We ended the call with nothing more than a quiet, "I'll see you at 9. But the silence that followed was louder than any storm. I dressed with slow, deliberate movements, a charcoal suit, ivory blouse, hair pulled back, no jewelry, only my grandmother's watch, scratched at the edges but still keeping perfect time. I caught my reflection just once in the hallway mirror before leaving. The woman staring back didn't blink. She didn't need to. The rain hadn't stopped. Austin's morning was gray and misty, droplets clinging to my windshield as I drove downtown. The streets were still sleepy, but I wasn't. I hadn't closed my eyes all night. Clarity kept me upright. By the time I stepped into the glass building, the receptionist was just turning on the lobby lights. She greeted me like she knew not to ask questions. I nodded, took the elevator up, and walked down the carpeted hallway to the corner office Marcus had reserved. The conference room was sleek, chrome accents, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a rain-blurred skyline. 3 chairs on one side, 2 on the other, and an empty one at the head of the table. Mine. Nathan was already there, sipping from a paper coffee cup like this was a routine business meeting. His suit looked freshly pressed, his hair perfect. 2 lawyers flanked him, one nervous and thin, the other older with practiced composure. "Jade," Nathan said like I was interrupting his morning routine. "We thought this was just to clear up. A misunderstanding about those wedding venue payments." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the briefcase I had placed gently beside me. No dramatic pause, no deep breath. I had prepared for this like one prepares for surgery. Methodically, precisely. First, I laid out the folder labeled Evidence. Then the torn pieces of the business loan application, now carefully reassembled, notarized with a sworn statement from Marcus's assistant, dated and stamped. Next, a set of printed spreadsheets showing a series of transfers from our joint wedding, account, each one marked as a vendor deposit but actually routed to a holding company that just happened to be registered under Bianca's maiden name until last week. I watched one of the attorneys shift uncomfortably in his seat. And finally, I placed a small digital recorder on the table and pressed play. Bianca's voice. He didn't need it. I watched him. Nathan. You said you'd handle this. We can't postpone. Again. Nathan's jaw twitched. I reached into the briefcase again and pulled out the sealed envelope from Eliza. I didn't read it aloud. I didn't have to. The expression on Nathan's face told me he already knew what it contained. Marcus leaned forward. Please confirm your voices on this recording for the record. Nathan didn't answer. His lawyer coughed once. We'd like a moment. In private with our client. I didn't blink. This isn't a negotiation. There was a pause, the kind that doesn't just occupy space but seems to compress the air in the room. Then I added coolly, you might want to review this. I slid another document across the table. A cease and desist letter complete with legal. Seal addressed to Bianca's design business. Effective immediately, all assets under Stellar Interiors are frozen, I said. And as of 2 days ago, the trademark has been disputed under my company's prior usage claim. Marcus nodded slightly. We anticipated fraudulent activity. Texas law is quite clear about business interference between family members. One of the attorneys looked like he might be ill. Nathan finally cleared his throat. This isn't public yet, right? I leaned forward, my voice barely above a whisper. That depends on your sister. I stood. I suggest you make a copy of that cease and desist. It's your only warning. They didn't follow me when I left. I didn't expect them to. The rain had softened to a drizzle by the time I stepped out of the building, but my pulse still pounded like thunder in my ears. Back across town, somewhere near the university district, Bianca was pacing. She stood in her loft's kitchen, phone pressed tight against her ear, barefoot on the hardwood floor, cold coffee abandoned on the counter. Her call went to voicemail again. Pick up, she muttered, biting her thumbnail. You said this wouldn't get complicated. She called another number. No answer. Then she opened her laptop, typed something into a banking portal, paused, and slammed it shut. Outside her window, the clouds shifted slightly, but inside, the storm had only begun. She came in like she was late for a cocktail party, unapologetic, unreadable, wearing white from shoulders to ankles. Her heels clicked softly against the hardwood, sharp but measured, like she'd practiced the rhythm for maximum effect. I didn't stand. I stayed seated behind my desk, a cup of green tea cooling beside a stack of client proposals I hadn't touched since yesterday. The blinds were half drawn, letting in just enough morning light to cast long, diagonal shadows across my design boards. Bianca paused at the threshold of my home office like she owned the air in it. Good morning, she said, her tone silky, rehearsed. We should talk, sister to sister. My eyes didn't leave her face. I didn't return the greeting. She walked in, anyway, glancing at the mood boards on the wall like they amused her. One of the fabric swatches, a hand-dyed silk I'd sourced from a local artisan, shifted slightly under her fingers. She adjusted it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You've always had such quaint taste, she murmured. I remained still. She circled the room slowly, like she needed to burn energy, or maybe delay what she already knew was coming. I never meant for it to go this far, she said at last, her back turned to me. But I needed something for myself for once. Something that wasn't just leftovers after you got all the attention. I let the silence stretch between us, unbroken, until even the clock on the wall seemed to tick more softly. She turned, her eyes glassy. You always had Dad's approval, Jade. The scholarships, the design awards, the golden touch. Mom and Dad never saw me the way they saw you. Still, I didn't speak. You think I planned everything from the beginning, that I'm some kind of mastermind. She gave a half laugh, brittle. I just wanted one thing that was mine. I opened the drawer beside me. Not rushed, not dramatic, just precise. From inside, I pulled out a thick manila folder and placed it squarely in front of me. Then I slid it toward her across the cherry desk. You'll want to see this. She didn't touch it right away. Her gaze flicked from the folder to me, then back again, like the weight of it had suddenly tilted the floor beneath her. What is it? She asked, her voice low. Everything, I said. Inside, a formal legal complaint filed yesterday. Charges: business interference, attempted drugging, conspiracy to defraud. Also inside, an affidavit from the caterer at the engagement party and the audio recording, the one that didn't just capture the cake switch but her whisper to Nathan. Her mistake. Bianca's fingers trembled as she reached for the paper, and then she saw the signature at the bottom of the affidavit. Her face drained of color. Miguel Suarez, she breathed. That's the caterer. I nodded once. He was just a server, she stammered. He didn't even... I helped his daughter get into design school 2 years ago, I said quietly. Wrote her recommendation, mentored her through her portfolio. He stayed in touch, told me he needed extra work. I recommended him. For the engagement party catering. Bianca sank into the chair across from me like the wind had gone out of her. You recorded me, she whispered. No, I replied. He did. And then he came straight to me. She blinked rapidly. You're filing charges against me for trying to what? Make you sick at your own party? No, I said. The charges are for attempting to drug someone at a catered event, which is a felony in Texas, plus business interference and attempted fraud. The audio is just supporting evidence. Her laugh came suddenly, sharp and off balance. You can't be serious. Jade, this will destroy our family's reputation. Do you understand what you're doing? I stood. No, it won't ruin the family's name. It'll define who we are. Finally, without the lies. She stood too, but with a jerk. Her composure cracked for a second, just long enough for me to see it. She gripped the back of the chair like it might steady her. You'd really go through with this? She asked. I tilted my head. I already did. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't apologize. She turned, heels echoing down the hallway, past the framed photo of our parents on the wall. She didn't glance at it, but I did. Dad was smiling in the picture, hand on my shoulder at my design school graduation. He used to say we were both determined, just in different ways. Now I wasn't so sure. They arrived 15 minutes after sunset. I'd been waiting by the kitchen window, watching the headlights sweep across the driveway like searchlights. When the doorbell rang, I didn't flinch. I set down my water glass, checked my phone one last time, and turned the living room lights down low. Atmosphere mattered tonight. I heard Bianca's laugh first. Fake, stretched too tight. And then Nathan's voice. Smoother, practiced, like he was entering a business meeting he thought he already controlled. They didn't knock after I opened the door. They just walked in. Bianca stepped over the threshold first, her white blazer still crisp in the humidity. Nathan followed, hands in pockets, his mouth already curled into a smile that didn't bother reaching his eyes. I figured you'd be dramatic, he said, unbuttoning his jacket. But this, dragging the whole family through legal mud? He gave a soft chuckle, then glanced at Bianca. She's built her whole career on harmony and balance, remember? I didn't respond, just turned and slowly reached behind me. Click. The deadbolt slid into place with a sound that cut through the soft instrumental music playing from the kitchen speaker. Bianca blinked. What are you doing? Making sure we're not interrupted, I said. My voice was quiet, but it landed like a stone dropped into still water. Nathan tilted his head. You're bluffing. You wouldn't risk the publicity. You hate disorder. You'd burn your entire career for what? Bianca hissed. To prove a point? Finally, I raised my voice. Just once. I'm not proving a point. I'm stopping a pattern. That silenced them. I walked past the kitchen island toward the credenza near the hallway and pulled out a folder. Then another. I carried them to the coffee table and laid them flat side by side. Paperwork. Financial records, canceled checks, emails, quiet damning things. Bianca crossed her arms. Nathan rolled his eyes. You filed some papers, he said. Big deal. I looked at him. I filed an injunction to freeze all joint assets pending investigation, including your startup, Nathan, the one you launched with a loan from my business line of credit. Remember? He stared at me. The smirk died on his lips. You've gone off the deep end, he said slowly. You're a resentful woman using the law to play victim. He grabbed the nearest decorative vase and hurled it against the far wall. It shattered just below the canvas I'd painted during my first year of therapy after our parents' accident. The water and flowers smeared down the white wall. Get a grip, he spat. Do you even know what you're doing? I do. I opened my laptop. The screen lit up his face, his jaw tightening, eyes narrowing as the footage began to play. Audio and video, crisp and clear. It showed the night before the engagement party, Bianca and Nathan in the catering kitchen of the venue, practicing. She plated 2 cake slices. He handed her a vial. They rehearsed the switch. You bugged me? He asked, voice ragged, stunned. No, I said, not looking away from the screen. I protected myself because I had a feeling the people I trusted might be planning something I wouldn't survive. The room went silent, except for the faint piano music from the kitchen. Nathan took 1 step back, then another. His breath came faster now, shallow and uneven. He started, but nothing followed. I waited. He stormed toward the door, yanked it open and slammed it behind him so hard that the frame rattled. The silence afterward was massive. Bianca stayed seated. Her shoulders had dropped. Her hands were trembling now, barely. But I saw it. She looked up at me, her voice so quiet it was almost not there. You think this is over? I didn't answer her because I didn't think it was over. I knew it was just beginning. The city was still waking when I left my house. Fog clung to the streets like breath on cold glass. I didn't bother with coffee. I hadn't slept anyway. My mind hadn't stopped moving since Nathan's exit or Bianca's last whisper. And now I had to finish what they started. By 7:30 a.m., I was at Marcus's office downtown. I handed over the footage. No small talk, no smiles, just the USB drive and my instructions. He watched it once, grimaced, and nodded. We'll request an emergency ethics hearing and evidence preservation order. But there's one more thing I'd suggest, Jade. I raised an eyebrow. A lab analysis of the cake sample just in case. I hesitated. I hadn't eaten it. True, he said. But Nathan did, and that might be enough. By 9 a.m., I was at the medical lab answering a technician's questions with as few words as possible. I handed over both cake slices, the untouched one I'd switched and the partial one Nathan had eaten. I'd saved them both, sealed and stored, with chain of custody documentation. Paranoia, maybe. Survival, absolutely. 3 hours later, the results came back. Sedatives, but not just anything you'd find in a medicine cabinet. A pharmaceutical compound typically used for surgical procedures. Powerful enough to cause temporary memory loss and disorientation. The perfect cover for whatever they had planned. Next. The dosage wasn't lethal, but it would have rendered me completely vulnerable, unable to defend myself, or even remember what happened. I didn't say a word to the technician. I just folded the paper and slid it into the folder labeled Evidence. It wasn't about making me sick. It was about making me helpless, and suddenly everything snapped into place. Bianca knew I was the sole trustee for our parents' estate since the accident. She also knew I'd recently requested a forensic audit of the foundation accounts, one she'd been delaying. There were inconsistencies in the disbursements, grants our father would never have approved. But if I had been incapacitated on my wedding day, if something had happened before the audit, Bianca would have been free to continue diverting funds with no one to stop her. She didn't just want me quiet. She wanted me out of the picture entirely. By noon, we were seated in a stark conference room. High ceiling, frosted glass, the seal of the state bar embedded in the carpet. An emergency hearing for Nathan's legal team had been expedited. Marcus, and I sat on one side of the long table. Across from us, Nathan, his expression unreadable, and two charcoal-suited attorneys. Bianca entered 5 minutes late, of course, dressed in white again, her posture too perfect. She wasn't summoned, but she walked in like she owned the room. "I'd like to speak," she said smoothly, "on behalf of my future brother-in-law." I didn't flinch. She spoke with polish, claimed the footage had been altered, that I had a grudge, had always resented their close friendship, and was using the legal system to air personal grievances. "If you check the metadata," she added, "you'll find inconsistencies. Jade is skilled with digital manipulation." Her voice was sweet enough to rot teeth. The board began to murmur, and then, just as planned, he entered. Miguel Suarez, the caterer, younger than most in the room, tie slightly askew. He cleared his throat and placed a hard drive on the table. "I'm here voluntarily," he said. "I captured backup footage from my kitchen's security system. It's untouched, and it matches hers." He looked at me. "She helped my daughter when no one else would. She didn't ask for anything in return, so today I'm not asking either." The room went quiet. The footage played. Angle 1, angle 2. Timestamps synced perfectly. Bianca's hand hesitated in the same spot. Nathan's nod. The cake switch. All of it. My video hadn't been doctored. It had been duplicated. One board member leaned forward, tapping a pen against the table. "This is more than just unethical conduct," he said. "This borders on criminal conspiracy." Nathan's face drained of color. Bianca stared blankly, her smile dissolving like sugar in hot tea. The board voted unanimously. Nathan's firm would face a full ethics investigation. They'd review all prior cases, including financial entanglements with Bianca's design businesses. We stood. I didn't gloat. I didn't even look back. Outside, under the gray morning sky, Bianca finally spoke. "You ruined everything." I turned to face her. "No," I said calmly. "You did. I just exposed it." She clenched her fists, lips trembling. For the first time in years, she looked like the younger sister, small, cornered, furious. I walked away. But I didn't know they'd planned one more move, one last trap, and I was walking straight into it. The invitation came the same afternoon Nathan's ethics investigation hit the local business news. It was sent to my old email, the one I hadn't used since I'd been quietly removed from the foundation's website. Subject line: Formal notice. Annual Foundation Gala seating confirmation. The message was brief, no greeting, just the time, the venue, and a dress code. Black tie required. They didn't expect me to come. They assumed I'd stay home, nursing wounds. They didn't know I'd already cauterized mine. By early evening, I was driving north on I-35 toward Dallas. My phone off. My words rehearsed in silence. The highway stretched ahead, empty and endless like the conversations Bianca and I should have had years ago. I arrived early on purpose and waited in the car across from the venue for 20 minutes, just watching. It was all perfectly orchestrated, crystal, chandeliers visible through high windows, a red carpet lined with potted orchids, velvet ropes, and immaculately dressed greeters checking invitations. But it was all too calculated, too precise, the kind of perfection that obscures truth. Inside, I was greeted with a smile that didn't reach the eyes. "We don't have a name tag for Jade, was it?" I said nothing. They seated me at the back, again, near the service entrance where the scent of catering trays leaked through every time a waiter passed. I let them think it would bother me. It didn't. Bianca was already on stage when I took my seat. White again, of course, like purity. Could be purchased and worn. She smiled like a politician, vacant eyes and a 1,000-watt grin as she praised the legacy our parents built, generation by generation. Her voice was honeyed, slow, perfectly modulated. She looked comfortable up there, untouchable. But legacies aren't built at galas. They're built in silence, in early mornings, in midnight sacrifices, in years of unseen work and unacknowledged dedication. And I had proof. Halfway through the night, the silent auction began. I could hear murmurs about luxury vacations, signed, memorabilia, fine wines, and then the next item appeared on the screen. Foundation archives, original grant documents, founding donor files. My throat tightened. It was the portfolio I'd compiled 8 years ago, before Bianca joined the board, before the meeting minutes were edited, before the website was updated to minimize my role. My handwriting was on those pages. My signature, my notes, my vision. They hadn't noticed what they were auctioning. They thought they were selling a piece of history, not realizing they were exposing their revisionism. I stood, walked forward. No microphone, no spotlight, just me and a room full of eyes that weren't accustomed to looking at me unless I was holding a pen to sign a check. I spoke anyway. "You've all supported something tonight, something that claims to honor my parents' vision. Just make sure the story you're funding isn't built on a lie." I picked up the portfolio, held it high enough for everyone to see the yellowing tabs, the hand-labeled sections. "This," I said, "was the beginning. Not what's been rewritten. Not the version you see in press releases or annual reports." I paused. "I've established a new foundation, one that supports emerging designers from underserved communities. It's fully funded, and 2 of this foundation's major donors have already committed to matching grants. Some of you in this room know who you are." Gasps, silence, and then an explosion of sound. Chairs scraping, whispers spreading like wildfire. I saw Nathan stand in the crowd, flushed and shouting, "She's manipulating everyone with this vindictive little performance." But it wasn't. Nathan's voice that cut through the chaos. It was the shattering of glass. Bianca had thrown a champagne flute. It missed by several feet, striking a marble column with a sharp, perfect crack. Security moved quickly. Not toward me, toward her. They didn't need instructions. As they approached, Bianca hissed, "This isn't finished." I looked at her last time. "No," I replied, "but your control is." And I left. I didn't wait for applause. I didn't need validation from a room that once pretended I didn't matter. Outside, smartphones recorded everything. I was prepared this time. A journalist thrust a microphone toward me. "Jade, did you know your sister and fiancé were conspiring against you?" I smiled, not broadly, not for show, just enough. "They didn't understand who I was," I said. "Now they do." Then I walked away. And the next morning, the headline read, "Designer outsmarts sibling scheme in stunning foundation showdown." I didn't smile when I read it, not because I wasn't satisfied, but because it didn't feel like a triumph. Not really. Not in the way Bianca or Nathan might have imagined. This wasn't entertainment. It wasn't revenge. It was restoration. And now that the chaos had begun to settle, the silence that followed was heavier than the storm that came before. Over the following days, reporters camped outside my design studio for statements. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years sent messages, half curious, half supportive. Industry colleagues called me brave, others called me calculating. One design blog even ran a feature titled, How far would you go to protect your creative legacy? They didn't use my name, but I was the how far. I stopped reading after that. Instead, I filled my days with creative work again, projects I'd pushed aside during wedding preparations. I spent hours at my drafting table, reconnecting with the precise lines and thoughtful spaces that had defined me before Bianca and Nathan tried to redefine me. There's something healing about returning to your essence, to the work that reminds you who you've always been beneath the chaos others create around you. 2 weeks passed before I received the email. It came from my father's former research assistant, someone I hadn't heard from since the accident 3 years ago. Jade, I was cleaning out some old files and found this video. Your father recorded it the week before the crash. I thought you should have it. I was sitting in my garden when I opened the attachment, surrounded by the native plants I'd carefully selected and arranged. Desert sage, Mexican feathergrass, coral honeysuckle climbing the wooden trellis. My hands trembled slightly as I pressed play. Jade, the voice said, warm and familiar. I'm recording this as a reminder to myself, but maybe someday you'll see it too. The new grant structure you proposed for the foundation, it's brilliant. You've always understood what this work is really about, that it's not just about funding but about transformation. If I forget to tell you how proud I am, know that I see you. We all do. I stopped the video, just sat there in the middle of my garden with bees humming around the lavender and birds calling from the pecan tree. It was his voice. The same one that used to explain architectural principles to me when I was 10, who taught me that design wasn't just about beauty, but about solving human problems with grace and intelligence. The message was brief, but it was enough. All this, time. I'd been moving forward without fully knowing if he'd recognized what I was trying to build. Me. Not the image Bianca projected, or the silence Nathan demanded. Just me. I walked through the garden slower that morning. The air felt clearer somehow, less like something pressing against my chest, more like something filling and sustaining me. Later that day, I visited the community design center I'd quietly funded, in East Austin. I hadn't been back since Bianca had tried to claim it as her philanthropic project at a charity luncheon last year. A teenage girl was sketching in the corner when I walked in. 15 or 16, maybe. Her fingers moved across the paper with natural talent, but technical uncertainty. She glanced up at me like I might interrupt her process. I'm just practicing, she mumbled before I could even speak. I nodded, sat down at the table opposite her, gave her a few moments of respectful silence. My teacher said I should focus on something more practical, she added, barely above a whisper. But I can't stop designing. I looked at her, really looked. Don't stop, I said. The world needs your vision. She blinked at me like no one had ever told her that before. Sometimes I think about the irony. All those years I was the rational one, the methodical one. The one who created detailed plans and precise renderings and didn't raise my voice when I should have. But precision isn't weakness. Sometimes it's strategy. Sometimes it's survival. Sometimes it's just the space between who you are and who you're becoming. That night, I returned to my house, more peaceful than the stylish prison Nathan had been designing around me. The framed sketch was the first thing I saw when I stepped through the door. I'd taken it from that engagement party, the one where everything began to unravel. On it, written in faint pencil, were 2 simple words I had jotted down as Bianca toasted unwavering loyalty, and Nathan smiled just a little too confidently. Trust yourself. I hung it in my studio, not because I needed to remember the betrayal, but because I needed to remember that even then, when they thought I was blind, I had already begun to see. It didn't erase what happened. It didn't undo the lies, but it reclaimed something no one else could define for me. My instincts, my voice, my truth. And for the first time in a long while, trusting those instincts felt like freedom. 6 months later, The legal proceedings were finally complete. Nathan's firm faced sanctions for ethical violations. Bianca's design license was under review for business practice irregularities. The foundation was being restructured under independent oversight. I wasn't there for any of the final hearings. I didn't need to be. I was standing in a newly renovated space in downtown Austin, watching as installation crews hung the sign for my expanded design collective, Authentic Spaces. The name had come to me during those dark nights after the engagement party, when I realized how much of my life had been designed by others. Maya, my new business partner, stood beside me, checklist in hand. "The mayor confirmed for the opening reception," she said, marking something off. "And the feature in Architectural Digest goes live tomorrow morning." I nodded, watching the workers carefully center the brushed steel lettering against the reclaimed brick wall. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "About seeing them?" I knew who she meant. Rumors had circulated that Bianca and Nathan might make an appearance at the opening, one last attempt to disrupt what they couldn't control. "No," I said, and meant it. "They don't have power here." The space around us was a testament to that truth. Soaring ceilings with exposed beams, walls of windows flooding the studios with natural light, flexible work areas where young designers could collaborate or focus in solitude. Every element reflected a core principle. Authenticity creates its own beauty. Maya smiled, understanding something beyond my words. We'd met at a design conference 3 years earlier, before Nathan, before the engagement. She'd reached out. The day after the foundation, Gala's story broke, not with sympathy but with a proposal. Partnership, equal vision. Shared values, no hidden agendas. "The lighting team needs your input on the gallery track system," she said, already moving toward the back of the building. "They have questions about the color temperature for the student showcase." That evening, I stayed late after everyone had left. The space had a different energy in the twilight. Quieter, more intimate, full of potential. I walked through each area, adjusting small details, aligning edges, creating the harmony that had always been my signature. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Final settlement documents filed today. It's officially over." I sat down on one of the window benches overlooking the city lights. Over. Such a simple word for such a complicated journey. The legal battle had ended, but its lessons would continue shaping me for years to come. I typed back, "Thank you for everything." His response came quickly. "You did the hard part. You trusted yourself when everyone told you not to." I set my phone down and looked around at what I'd built from the rubble of what they'd tried to destroy. There was poetry in that transformation, not because it erased the pain, but because it honored it. Every betrayal had become a building block. Every lie had clarified what truth meant to me. The opening reception exceeded everyone's expectations. The space filled with city officials, design professionals, students, clients, and media. The energy was electric, buzzing with conversations about innovation, community impact, and sustainable design principles. I was in the middle of explaining our mentorship program to the Arts Council director when I felt it, a shift in the room's temperature, a subtle rearrangement of molecules. I didn't need to turn around to know they had arrived. Maya appeared at my side, a silent question in her eyes. I nodded once, finished my sentence with perfect composure, and then turned. Bianca stood near the entrance, Nathan a few steps behind her. She wore black this time, not white. Her makeup was flawless, her smile practiced, but something about her seemed diminished, like a photograph that's been overexposed, losing its depth. The crowd between us parted slightly, creating an unintentional pathway. For 3 long seconds, our eyes met across the distance. I didn't move toward her. I didn't need to. Instead, I turned back to the Arts Council director. "The student showcase. Is this way?" I said, gesturing toward the gallery space where work from our community program was displayed. These young designers represent the authentic future of our field. Later, as I was speaking with a group of architecture students, I sensed someone approaching from behind. The conversation paused, eyes shifted, and I turned to find Nathan standing there, glass of sparkling water in hand, expression unreadable. "Congratulations," he said, the word falling between us like a stone dropped in still water. "It's impressive." I studied him for a moment. This man who had once seemed to possess every quality I thought I wanted. Now he looked smaller somehow, less substantial. "Thank you," I replied, my voice steady. "If you'll excuse me, these students have fascinating questions about adaptive reuse principles." I turned back to the students, whose eyes had widened at the exchange. As Nathan walked away, one of them leaned forward. "Was that?" she whispered. "Just someone I used to know," I said. "Now you were asking about structural integrity in renovation projects?" The night continued, a blend of meaningful conversations and momentary celebrations. I moved through the space with purpose, connecting people who should know each other, highlighting the work of emerging talents, embodying the leadership I'd always been capable of, but had dimmed to accommodate others' insecurities. Near midnight, as the last guests were leaving, I found myself alone in the gallery section. The lighting created gentle pools of illumination over each student project. I stood before one in particular, a model of a community healing garden, designed by the teenage girl I'd met at the center months before. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" The voice came from behind me. I turned to find Bianca standing there, her composure slightly fractured around the edges. "Yes," I agreed. "She has extraordinary vision." Bianca stepped closer to the display, studying the intricate details of the model. "I always envied that about you," she said, her voice softer than I'd heard it in years. "Your ability to see potential in things and people that everyone else overlooked." I said nothing, just watched her face in profile as she examined the model. "I didn't come to cause a scene," she said finally. "I just needed to see it." "See what?" I asked. "What you would build if I wasn't in your way." The honesty surprised me. For a moment, I glimpsed the sister I'd known before ambition had corroded her, before competition had replaced connection. "You were never in my way, Bianca," I said quietly. "You just thought you needed to be." She looked at me then, really, looked perhaps for the first time in years. "The irony is, I wanted what you had. Not your designs or your clients, the certainty. You always knew exactly who you were." "Not always," I said, "but I've learned to listen to myself even when other voices are louder." She nodded, a small gesture of understanding, not agreement. "Nathan and I are moving to Chicago next month. Fresh start, separate paths." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was acknowledgement, and sometimes that's where healing begins. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said and meant it. She gave me one last look, turned, and walked toward the exit. At the door, she paused, her hand on the frame. "The cake was my idea," she said, not turning back. "But I never meant—" "I know," I interrupted gently. "That's what makes it worse." After she left, I stood in the quiet gallery, surrounded by the creative expressions of young people who were just beginning to discover their voices. There was something profoundly right about ending this chapter here, among visions of what could be rather than reminders of what had been. The following morning, I arrived early at the collective. The cleaning crew had already finished, leaving the space immaculate and ready for its first official day of operation. Sunlight streamed through the eastern windows, creating geometric patterns across the polished concrete floors. I made my way to my private studio at the back of the building, a space I'd designed as a sanctuary rather than a showcase. No glass walls, no display lighting, just honest materials, functional, beauty, and the tools of my craft. On my desk sat a small package that hadn't been there the night before. No note, no card, just a simple box wrapped in craft paper. Inside was a brass key on a handcrafted leather tag stamped with a single word: truth. I recognized the craftsmanship immediately. It was from my father's old university friend, a master locksmith who had created custom keys for each of our childhood homes. My father had commissioned them as symbols of belonging, of having a place that was unquestionably yours. With the key was a small slip of paper with an address in the hill country outside Austin. I knew without checking that it was the location of our family's cabin, a property I thought had been sold after the accident but apparently had been preserved in trust. A text message arrived from an unknown number. Some legacies aren't meant to be reinvented. This one is still yours. R.M. My father's research assistant, the keeper of his video message. I held the key in my palm, feeling its weight, its history, its promise. Not every door from the past needs to be permanently locked. Some just need the right key to be opened on your own terms. Later that week, I drove out to the cabin. The winding road through the hills was exactly as I remembered, each curve revealing then concealing views of the valley below. The property itself was both familiar and new, the sturdy stone structure unchanged, but the surrounding landscape more wild, more free in the absence of constant tending. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The air was fresh. Someone had been maintaining the place. Sunlight filtered through the windows my father had designed to capture specific light patterns throughout the day. His architectural drawings still hung on the walls, preserved under glass, visual reminders of his belief that spaces shape lives. On the old oak desk in the corner sat a leather portfolio I recognized immediately. My first design sketches, the ones I'd shown him when I was 16, terrified he would think them naive or derivative. Instead, he had studied each one carefully, asking questions that pushed me to articulate my thinking, to defend my choices not with defensive energy but with growing confidence. Design isn't just what you create, he had told me that day. It's how you navigate the space between vision and reality. I opened the portfolio and found something unexpected. My sketches, yes, but interspersed with his notes, observations, questions, connections to historical precedents. On the final page, he'd written, "Jade sees what others miss. This will be both her challenge and her gift." I sat at the desk, surrounded by these artifacts of understanding, and felt something shift inside me. Not a dramatic revelation, but a quiet resettling, like furniture finding its rightful place in a well-designed room. The path forward wasn't about forgetting what Bianca and Nathan had done. It wasn't about pretending the betrayal hadn't altered me. It was about recognizing that their attempt to diminish me had actually illuminated my strength. Their effort to silence me had clarified my voice. I took out my sketchbook and began to draw, not plans or elevations or technical details, but the essence of what I had learned. The architecture of resilience, the design principles of authenticity, the negative space that defines the structure. Hours passed as I worked, the light changing around me, shadows shifting across the paper. When I finally looked up, the sun was setting, painting the hills in gold and amber. I had filled pages without noticing, had translated experience into expression without forcing it. Before leaving, I placed one of these new sketches in the leather portfolio alongside my teenage drawings and my father's notes, 3 generations of thought and conversation across time. Then I locked the cabin, knowing I would return not as a visitor to the past, but as a curator of my own continuing story. Back in Austin, life at the collective took on its own rhythm. Each day brought new challenges, new collaborations, new opportunities to create spaces that honored both function and feeling. I expanded the mentorship program, partnered with sustainable materials innovators, accepted speaking engagements I would have once declined out of misplaced modesty. 6 months after the opening, I received an invitation to judge an international design competition, the same one where I had won my first professional recognition years earlier. The theme was Authentic Habitat, Designing Spaces of Truth. I smiled at the synchronicity. The night before submitting my acceptance, I sat in my home studio, the space I had reclaimed and redesigned after canceling the wedding. On the wall hung the framed sketch from the engagement party with those 2 words, "Trust yourself," now serving not as a reminder of betrayal, but as a cornerstone of my rebuilt life. Beside it hung a new addition, a simple architectural rendering of a structure that existed only in possibility. A women's design collaborative in my mother's hometown, a place where creativity and community could intersect without pretense or performance. The plans were nearly complete, funding secured through grants and private donors who believed in the vision. I traced my finger along the lines of the drawing, feeling the intention behind each decision, each proportion, each relationship between spaces. This was what survival looked like after the storm, not just rebuilding what was lost, but reimagining what could be. My phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Final approval came through for the collaborative. We break ground next month. I smiled, typing back, "Perfect timing. I have some new ideas to share tomorrow." Before turning in for the night, I stood at my bedroom window, looking out at the Austin skyline. The city was alive with lights, some steady, some flickering, all part of a larger composition. I thought about Bianca, somewhere in Chicago now, perhaps finding her own way forward without the desperate need to diminish others. I thought about Nathan, his carefully constructed facade now dismantled, facing the consequences of prioritizing appearance over substance. I didn't wish them suffering. I wished them awareness, the kind that comes only after you've faced your own reflection without flinching, without filters, without excuses. The journey from that engagement party to this moment hadn't been easy or straightforward. It had required courage to trust my instincts when evidence was still emerging. It had demanded precision when emotions threatened to blur boundaries. It had called for patience when immediate reaction would have been simpler but less effective. But standing here now, I understood something essential. The most beautiful designs often emerge from solving the most difficult problems. The most authentic spaces are created by those who have known what it means to live in false ones. I turned from the window and picked up my sketchbook one last time before sleep. On a fresh page, I wrote a single sentence. The most powerful response to betrayal isn't revenge, it's creation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new beginnings, and I was ready, not despite what had happened, but because of how I had transformed it. This was the ultimate design project, crafting a life of integrity from the raw materials of experience, both beautiful and painful. And unlike the cake at that engagement party, this creation was authentically mine. Have you ever realized that the moment that could have destroyed you was actually the catalyst for your transformation? 1 year after that engagement party, 1 year after my sister tried to drug my wedding cake and I switched it with her fiancé's, I found myself standing on a stage in Barcelona, accepting the Global Design Innovator Award for the women's collaborative I'd built from the ashes of betrayal. The spotlight was warm on my face as I looked out at the audience of industry leaders, educators, and emerging talents. These weren't people who knew me for scandal. They knew me for substance, for vision, for the spaces I'd created that managed to be both beautiful and honest. The most meaningful designs, I began, don't emerge from perfect circumstances. They're born when we're challenged to see differently, to solve unexpected problems, to find stability in shifting landscapes. I paused, feeling the weight of the glass award in my hands. Sometimes the greatest act of creativity is redesigning your own life when others have tried to erase your blueprint. The applause that followed wasn't for my personal story. Most, People in that room didn't know those details. It was for the universal truth beneath it. Transformation is the ultimate creative act. That night, after the ceremony, I stood on the balcony of my hotel room overlooking the Mediterranean. The city lights mirrored the stars, creating patterns both human-made and cosmic. I thought about the incredible distance I'd traveled, not just geographically but emotionally. From that moment of shocked clarity in my garden, when I first realized what Bianca and Nathan had planned. My phone buzzed with congratulatory messages from the team back in Austin. The collaborative was thriving, with 30 women designers now working in our expanded space. The mentorship program had placed 15 graduates in prestigious firms. The Community Design Center had opened satellite locations in 3 underserved neighborhoods. Success is its own form of vindication, but it wasn't what healed me. The healing had happened in quieter moments, in the courage to trust my instincts. Again, in the discipline of creating boundaries, in the vulnerability of forming new partnerships without letting suspicion become my default setting. I scrolled through the messages until I reached one that made me pause. Saw the live stream of your speech? Dad would be proud. Maybe we could talk sometime. Bianca. After a year of silence. I set the phone down without responding, not from anger, but from a need to honor my own timing. Forgiveness wasn't a single decision. It was a landscape you navigated differently each day, sometimes moving forward, sometimes circling back, always finding your own path through unfamiliar terrain. The next morning, I walked through Barcelona's Gothic quarter, letting myself get pleasantly lost among narrow medieval streets and unexpected plazas. As an architect and designer, I'd always been fascinated by how cities tell their stories through space, how history and innovation coexist, how public and private realms converse with each other. In a small ceramic studio tucked between centuries-old stone buildings, I found myself drawn to a collection of kintsugi pieces, broken pottery, repaired with gold, the Japanese art of honoring breaks and repairs as part of an object's history, rather than something to disguise. Beautiful, aren't they? The artist appeared beside me, an older woman with silver hair and hands marked by decades of working with clay. Most people try to hide their breaks, but these, she gestured to her creations, these celebrate resilience. I nodded, carefully lifting a bowl where gold seams created an intricate pattern across the once shattered surface. It's honest, I said, and somehow more beautiful for its history. She smiled. That's the secret. The break isn't the end of the story. It's just a plot twist. I purchased the bowl, carrying it carefully as I continued my exploration of the city. By mid-afternoon, I found myself in a sun-drenched plaza, sitting at a small cafe with my sketchbook open before me. I began to draw, not buildings or interiors, but the kintsugi bowl, its golden seams capturing light in unexpected ways. Beside it, I sketched the layout for a new project that had been forming in my mind since arriving in Barcelona, a series of transitional spaces for women rebuilding their lives after trauma. Not shelters exactly, but thoughtfully designed environments that honored both vulnerability and strength, that created safety without isolation, that recognized healing as an active rather than passive process. I was so absorbed in the drawing that I didn't immediately notice when someone stopped beside my table. A shadow fell across the page, and I looked up. Your work is beautiful. A woman about my age, with kind eyes and an accent I couldn't quite place. You're Jade Chen, aren't you? From last night's ceremony? I nodded, closing my sketchbook partially, a habit of creative privacy. I'm Elena Vasquez, she said. I lead the Transformative Spaces Initiative at UNESCO. May I join you? For a moment, over coffee, Elena explained their project, a global effort to create healing environments in regions affected by conflict or natural disasters. "We're looking for designers who understand that spaces aren't neutral," she said, "who recognize that how we design affects how people recover, reconnect, rebuild. Like environmental psychology, but applied specifically to trauma and resilience," I suggested. Her eyes lit up. "Exactly. Most architects focus on physical needs: shelter, function, aesthetics. But the emotional and psychological dimensions of space are equally important, especially for those whose sense of safety has been compromised." By the time we parted 2 hours later, I had accepted her invitation to join a design charrette in Geneva the following month, a collaborative workshop bringing together architects, psychologists, trauma specialists, and survivors to rethink how built environments could support healing. Back in my hotel room that evening, I found myself reflecting on how profoundly my path had changed direction in just 1 year. If Bianca and Nathan's plan had succeeded, if I had eaten that drugged cake, if I had been disoriented and vulnerable, at a critical moment, if I had lost control of the foundation and my design practice, I wouldn't be here now, preparing to contribute to work that mattered deeply to me. Their attempt to diminish me had instead expanded my vision, my reach, my impact. There was a profound irony in that outcome, one that didn't erase the pain of their betrayal, but somehow transformed it into something meaningful. I picked up my phone and finally replied to Bianca's message. "I'm in Barcelona until Friday. Healing takes time. So does trust. But conversation is a place to start." Her response came quickly. "I understand. Thank you for even reading my message. Safe travels." It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't even forgiveness yet. But it was acknowledgement of her reaching out, of my right to boundaries, of the long road between broken trust and rebuilt connection. I placed the kintsugi bowl on the hotel desk, watching how it caught the evening light. Tomorrow I would return to my team in Austin, to the collaborative, to the life I had designed with intention after others had tried to design it for me. But I would carry this with me. This tangible reminder that being broken doesn't make you less valuable. Sometimes it makes your story more visible, your strength more evident, your beauty more complex. 3 months later, I stood in the central courtyard of the Women's Design Collaborative, surrounded by team members, community partners, and students from our mentorship program. The Geneva charrette had evolved into something larger, a multi-year initiative to develop design protocols for healing spaces, with our collaborative selected as the American hub for research and implementation. This partnership allows us to extend our impact beyond our local community, I explained to the gathered group. Every design principle we develop, every approach we refine, will influence projects around the world. Maya, now serving as our operational director, stepped forward. "We'll be creating a dedicated research studio on the East Wing," she added, "and expanding our fellowship program to include international designers." As the presentation continued, I noticed a familiar figure standing at the back of the courtyard, partially obscured by the Japanese maple we'd planted during our opening ceremony. Bianca. She hadn't announced her visit, hadn't tried to speak with me directly. She was simply observing, her expression a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't fully decipher from a distance. When the presentation ended and people dispersed into smaller discussion groups, I made my way toward her. She straightened as I approached, uncertainty visible in her posture. "You've created something remarkable," she said quietly. "Thank you for coming," I replied, genuine despite my lingering caution. "Are you still in Chicago?" She nodded. "Working with a small firm specializing in healthcare environments. It's humbling. Starting over." We stood in awkward silence for a moment, years of shared history and recent pain creating an invisible barrier between us. "I've been in therapy," she finally said, looking down at her hands, "trying to understand why I did what I did, why I was so threatened by your success that I convinced myself you deserved to be hurt. I didn't respond immediately, allowing her words to settle between us. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she continued. "I'm not even asking for another chance. I just wanted you to know that I recognize what I did, the person I became." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. "And I see what you've built despite it all." The courtyard had emptied now, leaving us alone beneath the dappled shade of the maple tree. Its leaves had begun to turn, edges tinged with crimson, a reminder that transformation is rarely sudden, often beginning at the periphery before moving inward. "The design world is small," I said finally. "Our paths will cross again, professionally. I can't promise immediate trust, but I can offer professional respect. The rest will depend on consistent actions over time." She nodded, accepting these terms without protest. That's more than I have any right to expect. Before she left, she handed me a sealed envelope. "From Dad's safety deposit box," she explained. "The bank finally processed the paperwork. This was marked for you specifically." I took it, feeling its weight, heavier than paper alone would justify. "Whatever you decide about me," she said, quietly, "don't let what happened change who you are. Your ability to see beauty and possibility where others don't. It matters. It's always mattered." After she departed, I sat alone in the courtyard, turning the envelope in my hands. The maple leaves cast shifting patterns across the concrete, nature's own version of kintsugi, light finding pathways through separation, creating momentary art from absence. Inside the envelope, I found a small leather journal, its pages filled, with my father's architectural sketches, observations, and reflections. Tucked between the pages was a smaller envelope containing a delicate silver key on a fine chain. The accompanying note, written in my father's precise architect's script, read, "For Jade, the key to the lakeside property. Some designs need time and solitude to fully realize themselves. This space has always spoken to you. Listen to it when you need clarity. Your vision is your truest inheritance." I held the key in my palm, feeling its specific weight and contours. The lakeside property, a small parcel of land 3 hours north of Austin that my father had purchased decades ago, but never developed. We had camped there occasionally during my childhood, sleeping under stars so bright they seemed almost tangible, planning the home we would someday build together. After his death, I'd assumed it had been sold or lost in the complicated aftermath. I had never mentioned it to Bianca or Nathan. It had been a private dream, a creative sanctuary known only to my father and me. That weekend, I drove north, following roads that became progressively narrower and less traveled until finally turning onto a dirt path marked only by coordinates rather than a formal address. The property revealed itself gradually. First the glimmer of lake water through trees, then the small clearing where we had pitched our tents, and finally the massive oak that had served as the anchor point for all our imagined designs. The land was wilder now, reclaiming spaces that had once been cleared, but its essential character remained unchanged. Standing at the edge of the clearing, I felt a profound sense of reconnection, not just with the physical place, but with the creative spirit it had always nurtured in me. I spent the day walking the property, reacquainting myself with its contours, its light patterns, its natural gathering places. As the sun began to set, I sat beneath the oak tree and opened my father's journal, reading his thoughts on harmony between built and natural environments, on designing for human experience rather than just human occupation, on creating spaces that evolve rather than simply endure. On the final page, dated just weeks before the accident, he had written, "Showed Jade's portfolio to Hiroshi today. He sees in her work what I've always seen, an intuitive understanding of balance between presence and absence, between what we create and what we intentionally leave untouched. She doesn't just design spaces, she honors the space between things. This property will be her canvas someday." Beneath this entry was a rough sketch of a structure that seemed to emerge organically from the landscape. walls that followed natural contours, rooms that framed specific views, spaces that flowed into each other with natural logic. It wasn't a finished design but a suggestion, a conversation starter between father and daughter, present and future. I traced the lines with my fingertip, feeling a connection that transcended time and loss. Then I took out my own sketchbook and began to draw, not copying his vision, but entering into dialogue with it, honoring his intentions while expressing my own evolution. As darkness fell, I sat beneath the stars that had witnessed my childhood. Dreams, now illuminating my adult path forward. The property would become something new, not just a personal sanctuary, but a retreat center for designers seeking to reconnect with natural wisdom, to create from authenticity rather than artifice, to find their true voice in a profession often dominated by trends and commercial pressures. I stayed until morning, sleeping in my car, waking to mist rising off the lake and deer moving silently through the trees. Before leaving, I buried a small time capsule beneath the oak, containing my father's key, a piece of the kintsugi bowl I had purchased in Barcelona, and a single page from my sketchbook detailing the first phase of what would become the Authentic Vision Design Retreat. Back in Austin, life resumed its rhythm, but something had shifted inside me. A deeper alignment between past and future, between personal history and professional purpose. The collaborative continued to expand its reach. The UNESCO partnership opened new pathways for impact, and the mentorship program celebrated its first international scholarship recipients. 6 months later, I found myself in the audience at a design conference in Chicago, listening to a panel discussion on ethical practice in architecture and design. One of the speakers was talking about accountability, about recognizing harm caused by exploitative design practices and working toward reparation. True innovation isn't just about creating something new, the speaker emphasized. It's about creating something better, more equitable, more sustainable, more honest. I nodded in agreement, making notes in the margins of my program. When the panel ended and people began to disperse for the networking reception, I felt a light touch on my shoulder. Your mentorship program was mentioned in the breakout session on education, Nathan said, his voice quieter than I remembered. They're using it as a case study in creating access for underrepresented designers. I turned, surprised by his approach but composed in my response. That's good to hear. The students deserve the recognition. He looked different, less polished, more substantial somehow. The carefully crafted charm had been replaced by something that appeared to be genuine humility. I won't take much of your time, he said. I just wanted to say that what you've built, it matters. And I'm sorry I tried to take it from you. There was no artifice in his words, no strategic angle I could detect. Just a simple acknowledgement that carried the weight of difficult self-reflection. Thank you for saying that, I replied. It couldn't have been easy. He shook his head slightly. Nothing worthwhile ever is. He hesitated, then added, Bianca mentioned she saw you, that you're creating something at the lakeside property. Yes, I confirmed, offering no additional details. He nodded, respecting the boundary. Your father always believed in your vision, even when I was trying to convince him otherwise. A flash of shame crossed his face at this admission. He never wavered in his faith in you. As he turned to leave, I felt a strange sense of completion. Not forgiveness exactly, but the closing of a chapter that no longer needed to define my story. That evening in my hotel room, I opened my laptop to find an email from Elena at UNESCO. The subject line read, Geneva proposal approved, full funding secured. The message detailed the final approval for our Healing Spaces initiative, a 3-year commitment to develop and implement trauma-informed design principles in 5 regions around the world. Our collaborative would serve as both research hub and training center, bringing international designers to Austin and sending our team members into the field. Attached was a formal letter of commendation, recognizing the innovative approach to human-centered design that had distinguished our proposal from dozens of others. The final paragraph read, "Your personal journey from individual practice to collaborative leadership exemplifies the transformative potential we seek to harness through this initiative." They didn't know the specifics of that journey, the betrayal, the near miss with drugged cake, the legal battles and public revelations. They only knew the outcome. A designer who had transformed personal challenge into collective opportunity, who had refused to let broken trust become a barrier to new connections. I closed my laptop and walked to the window, looking out at Chicago's illuminated skyline. Somewhere in this constellation of lights, Bianca was rebuilding her life, finding her authentic path forward. Somewhere else, Nathan was confronting the consequences of prioritizing ambition over integrity. And here I stood, watching a city shine against the darkness, each light representing stories I would never know but could still appreciate from a distance. 2 weeks later, I stood at the lakeside property, now transformed by the beginnings of construction. The retreat's foundation had been laid, following the natural contours of the land just as my father's sketch had suggested. The main structure was taking shape, a harmonious blend of wood, stone, and glass that seemed to have grown from the earth rather than been imposed upon it. The construction team had preserved the massive oak, creating a circular gathering space beneath its spreading branches. This would become the heart of the retreat, a place for designers to share ideas, challenge assumptions, and reconnect with the natural wisdom that often gets lost in contemporary practice. Maya walked beside me, reviewing plans for the next phase. "The dormitories will be completed by winter," she noted, "and the studio spaces should be ready for the first resident designers by early spring." I nodded, visualizing the completed retreat, not just as physical structures, but as a living ecosystem of creativity, authenticity, and purposeful design. The UNESCO teams will need orientation before their field assignments. We should schedule their residencies first. As we continued our walk around the property, I found myself drawn to the lakeshore, where smooth stones created a natural transition between land and water. I picked up one particularly beautiful specimen, granite, with a vein of quartz running through it like a lightning strike. "Nature's version of kintsugi," I observed, showing it to Maya. She smiled, understanding the reference from our many conversations about resilience and beauty. "The Japanese have another concept I've always loved," she said. "Wabi-sabi, finding beauty in imperfection, accepting the natural cycle of growth and decay. Embracing the broken places," I added, "rather than pretending they don't exist." Later that afternoon, as the construction team packed up for the day, I sat alone beneath the oak tree, watching the setting sun cast golden light across the half-built retreat. My father's journal lay open in my lap, his words from decades ago, speaking directly to this moment. Architecture at its best doesn't impose meaning. It creates space for meaning to emerge. It doesn't dictate experience. It invites discovery. Our greatest achievement as designers isn't controlling what happens in the spaces we create, but enabling possibilities we never imagined. I traced these words with my fingertip, feeling their truth resonate through my professional journey and personal transformation. The retreat rising before me wasn't just a tribute to his vision or a manifestation of mine. It was a living dialogue between past wisdom and future possibility, between individual creativity and collective purpose. As twilight deepened into darkness, I remained beneath the oak, watching stars appear one by one above the lake. I thought about the long, complicated path that had led me here. From the moment I saw Bianca slip something into my wedding cake, to this peaceful evening, at the edge of creation, what had begun as an act of self-preservation, switching those cake plates when no one was watching, had evolved into something far more significant, a reclamation not just of my safety, but of my authentic vision, my true voice, my rightful place in the world I had always sought to improve through design. The betrayal that might have destroyed me had instead become the catalyst for my deepest work, my most meaningful connections, my most authentic self. Not because pain itself is transformative, but because how we respond to it can be. I stood gathering my father's journal and my own sketchbook, past and present in conversation, legacy and innovation intertwined. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new beginnings. The retreat would continue taking shape. The collaborative would welcome international partners. The mentorship program would launch its next cohort. And I would continue designing not just spaces but possibilities. For myself and for others seeking to build beauty from broken places, to find strength in vulnerability, to create authenticity in a world that often rewards performance over truth. As I walked back toward my car, I passed the construction site one last time. In the moonlight, the emerging structure cast intricate shadows across the clearing, lines and patterns that would shift with each passing hour, each changing season, each new perspective. That was the ultimate lesson, wasn't it? That our designs, whether for buildings or for lives, are never truly finished. They evolve, they adapt, they transform in response to challenge and opportunity alike. And sometimes, like that wedding, cake I never ate, the most important designs are the ones we have the courage to reimagine completely. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.